What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Cashflow podcast. Today we have a great guest in Justin Cambra. How are you doing today, Justin?
Doing excellent. Thanks for having me, Evan.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for being on. Super excited to hear your background, and you've been crushing it. So let's just go first off. How'd you get started in real estate?
Well, in real estate, I think I got started about 6 years ago, so 2016. I had owned houses before, but it wasn't until about 2016 where it's kind of had a combo of things happening in my life. So one, I work at Amazon. I was getting these what are called RSUs, restricted stock units. So good news is I was getting all this Amazon money coming to me. And then I was at a point where I was like, man, I'm working all these hours. I'm like, I'm going nowhere. Like, I want to get out. And then at the same time, my dad was having some health issues. Come to find out later it was cancer. So it had these like three converging things that wanted it led to me finding I got to find a way out. And then the more that I was reading and online and stuff, I was like, man, this real estate is like the only simple way that I could get out and still have, work my job. And so in 2016, I went and started. At the time, I didn't know it was a house hack, but I was just like, I called it the and one, like in basketball.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, I want to buy this house and then have the and one. And so like it was a duplex, and then I ended up living in the top unit, which is one bed, one bath, and then I had a three bed, one and a half bath down below. And since I worked at Amazon, I published on the internal for rent listing, and literally like 5 minutes later, a guy goes, "I'll be there tomorrow," and then I was like, "Okay," and then he showed up tomorrow. He's like, "I want." I'm like, "Okay," and he's like, "Well, how much is the security deposit and stuff?" And I was like, "Hold on." So then I was talking to my girlfriend. I was like, "What do we do for security deposit?" And then she was like, "I don't know, maybe like a half month's rent and like 500 for the pet." And so we're like, and we just figured it out on our way, and that's how it started back in 2016.
Wow,
Um,
that's awesome. It's so funny because now everyone knows what the house hack is. Like
right.
everyone, it's coined by Bigger Pockets. Brandon Turner says it all the time. It's house hack. That's what it is. But I've had a couple people on here as well that they did it before it even was called anything, and they just thought it was a smart idea, which is awesome. It sounds like you did the same exact one. But I love the and one. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you didn't like no one in your family had done real estate as far as investing before. It was just you kind of pioneered and kind of went off on your own and did that.
Exactly. Yep. We had so my dad had his own business, but it was not in real estate. So
Gotcha.
we were agricultural based. So he was obviously getting land and raising cattle and stuff on it. But in terms of like straight real estate, I'm the first one in the family to do that.
Yes.
Everything else relates to farmland.
So
So more so about growing crops or cattle.
I guess you did see a little bit of entrepreneurship from your father. Would you say?
Mhm.
Did you learn anything or see anything that maybe you're better not better off, but maybe you can have that time freedom if you own your own business, or you could create your own hours or whatever it may be. Did you learn anything from that?
So I learned you could make a lot of money,
There you go. Yeah.
but it's a lot of effort, and there's a lot of it comes down to sales. But he ended up spending, in my opinion, way too much time into it. So I'm trying to figure out as I scale my business, how do I put less time in and get more out, versus 1 hour in get you the same amount out. And so it's all about I'm trying to do better at efficiency of time spent.
Exactly. I love that. So going back to your first deal, so you the and one, so you end up getting
Mhm.
someone, and you kind of just you kind of jumped out of the parachute and built your parachute on the way down. It's kind of what you did. And where'd you go for resources since it was your first property? Did you do a lease? How did you handle everything?
So the short answer is I just figured, like you just mentioned, build the parachute on the way down. I knew I wanted to do something to where I could get in for low down and then have
Yeah.
some sort of supplemental income. And so I literally that night we took the guy's security deposit and I was like, now what do we do with this, And then I was like, well, now I got to give him a lease, and I told him I'd get him a lease by tomorrow. I literally was like Googling leases, and I think I got it was like Rocket Lawyer or like
Yeah.
one of those like I paid like $100 and I filled it out and then I sent it to him, and this guy was very analytical. He's like, you know, what about the house rules? I'm like, what about the house rules? And he's like, you don't have any? I'm like, no. What do you recommend? He's like, well, we should probably be quiet between 10 and 6 a.m., 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I'm like, sounds good. Write it in there, send it back to him, and then we just kind of was figured it out as I was going.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so you got that first property. What did that teach you? Did was that the turning point where you were like, you know what, this is paying for my mortgage right now. I love real estate. Let's get another one. Was that your thought process?
Yeah, it was kind of the first, like I don't know if this is a good example, but like if you're, they have the saying like the first time you use like heroin, you're
Yeah.
addicted. So after I got this first one, I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome because like
Yeah.
at the time it wasn't a perfect house hack, so I was still supplementing some of the mortgage, but I'm like, I used to be, renting an apartment. I think it was like $2,200 a month, something like that. All
Wow.
that was just going out the window. And then now I was house hacking, and I was getting, I think it was around 2,000, and my mortgage is around 3,000, somewhere in there. So I was only paying 1,000, but then I'm own a property, and I had the debt pay down, the tax benefit, all those good things.
Exactly. And you know what? The most expensive expense usually for a typical person is their mortgage or rent. And that's how it is. You were able to cut that in half, and then also instead of throwing out that money, you were able to put it into built-in equity and pay down the property, which is huge. So how far after that first deal did you get your second one?
So that was, let's see, August of 2016. It was the first one, and then the second one was May of 2017.
Okay.
So call it 9-ish months
And
after.
what did that one? Did you go into like another house hack? Was it single family? What did you go into?
So I'm very non-conventional. What happened was, so at the time I was in finance at Amazon, so I used to analyze future building launches. So I do for these 5-year or 7-year NPVs. So for me to analyze properties was real simple. And what I realized is that nothing cash flowed in Seattle, or near me, without putting a lot of money down, which I didn't want to put a lot of money down. And so I just so happened to come across, I was like, so where can I go? And I was like, well, my brother lives in Eastern Washington, which is Yakima. It's about 2.5 hours directly east. And then I was on LoopNet. And, everyone says LoopNet's where deals go to die. But I was
Yeah.
like, it was like a Friday night. I see this property. It's an 11 unit. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is like cheap, because it was about the same price as a single family on the west side. But it was 11 units. And then I contacted the agent, got some information, and then, within the week I was under contract on that property.
Wow. Okay. And did you end up settling on that? So that's a big step from going, from a house hack to now an 11 unit where you have 11 tenants now. What was the
Right.
transition like on that and the learning curve?
So definitely a learning curve. I didn't know what I didn't know. So as I was getting into it, like my agent that I used was not like a really a multifamily guy, and um, so working with him and trying to understand like how it works. And then the other one was, I remember this because I he gave me a referral for a mortgage broker, and I was like, hey, I need this loan on this property. And I walked through everything. He goes, well, I don't do commercial loans. I'm like, what's a commercial loan? He's like, well, anything with 5 units or more. And so I was like, okay, then do you know of anybody that does commercial loans? So then he referred me to his friend who does commercial loans. And then I ended up going with that guy, which it was at US Bank, and he helped me get into my first loan.
One thing that I love that you're kind of talking about is you just jumped into it, which a lot of
Right.
people analysis paralysis that Bigger Pockets mentions all the time, but a lot of people hit that curb and they just can't get over it. It's just something that's stopping them, whether it's fear or whatever. You kind of dove in, and I'm 100% like you, where I'll just dive in, obviously run
Right.
numbers, make sure it's not a terrible deal, but I'll jump in and learn while I'm doing something. And in my experience, I love to get your thought too. My experience is you learn the most. You can educate yourself, which I think it's huge, but you'll learn the most
Right.
by doing. Would you say the same?
100%. Because I talk to a lot of people about real estate because that's all I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, I just get in and do it. And I go, if you're really interested, you're going to learn 80% of what you're going to need to know in 30 to 90 days. After that, everything comes from what I like to say live ammo. Like if you're not getting out there and putting in offers and getting feedback on it's your offers are bad, or you're not talking to mortgage brokers on rates to figure out what the payment's going to be or what the insurance is, you're not really going to be able to learn. So I try to get everybody like you should one have the money. You should always be building the money for the first down payment. But within 30 to 90 days, you should be ready to make an offer if you're really that interested.
Yeah, and I've never heard that before. I think that's awesome. So, is it because the first 30 to 90 days you're going to learn the most because you're the most excited? Is that why?
Well, it's one, you're most excited, and two, it's really not that complicated. What I always like to say is like there's a ton of people that make a lot of money that in real estate that never went to college, right? Most of the people that I'm talking with have an undergrad degree, a master's degree. They have kids. I'm like, this is way easier than having kids. Well, I don't have kids, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine, trying to take care of a kid. I'm like, real estate is easy relative to that. So it's like
Yeah.
you just got to get your base foundation of information. And there's so much free content between your podcast and Bigger Pockets and YouTube, and it is so easy to get the baseline. The real learning comes when you actually get into the game and start putting in offers.
Yeah. So did you have any type of mentor?
So no, in the first couple of years, no like paid mentorship. I
Yeah.
had a few people going through meetups in person. One of them being Enrique Jevons, which is my property manager for that 11 unit, and then now he manages my stuff on the west side. I would see him at meetups. He's a friendly guy. He was originally on Bigger Pockets, and so I purposely sought him out because I was like, well, I bought this property. I don't have a property manager, but I know he's the king of Yakima because of his podcast episode. So I'm like, I know he's going to be at this meetup, so I went and found him, and I was like, hey, I need to talk to you. I need you to manage this property. And then he's such a nice guy. He kind of talked to me about how he manages it, his portfolio, and then kind of helped me get into the game. I mean, at the time he had like 100 and something units, so he's
Wow.
killing it.
Yeah.
And then at the time I had my duplex, and then I was buying this 11 unit, and so I always take that and keep in my mind that I need to pay it forward. So like I have like a meetup at Amazon where I help Amazon people as I'm paying it forward, and then as people reach out on Instagram or Facebook, I try to help them out as well.
That's great. That's a great mission. And I don't want to gloss over. I mean, you added value to your property manager to be able to be in a position to talk to him about real estate, for him to help you out and kind of give you some tips and whatnot, and then also have him manage your property so that you're in constant conversation with him. So anything comes up, I'm sure you could ask him, and he like probably would have no problem telling you the answer because you added value by buying a 11 unit and then putting it under management with him. So it makes him money, and he probably has no problem, talking with you. So let's go ahead and just go over just what do you have right now as far as your portfolio, and how is your
Mhm.
business structured?
Got it. The portfolio, I have 33 properties in 88 units, and that's predominantly in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where most of those are at. I have a few of are in Detroit, and then the balance is in Seattle area. That
Okay.
mix is comprised of a couple different types. I do across all spectrum. So I have short-term rentals, one medium-term rental, and then the majority are long-term rentals. And then in terms of structure, let's see, I think I'm trying to figure the number. It's roughly around 10 of the properties are in some sort of partnership. The
Okay.
other 23 properties are just me.
Great. No, that's awesome. And would you say that what kind of properties? Because I know I know you flip. I know you have short term rentals, all that. What properties do you have that are partnership? Is it a certain group, or is it kind of spread out?
All the partnership ones are all in Milwaukee. And so why
Okay.
Milwaukee? My goal is like, how do I get out of the, W-2 9 to 5 grind?
Yeah.
So Midwest is where the money's at, or I should say where the cash flow is at.
Yes.
And so I cut my teeth there, and then I owned 19 total properties before I did any sort of partnerships. And so the easiest incremental add for a partnership was Milwaukee. I have the agent, I have the property manager, I have the inspector, lender. So like for me to do anything, it's very easy to add a partnership.
Perfect. And is how'd you find the partner?
So I talk about real estate to everybody, and
Yeah.
then by default, people then ask me.
Perfect.
And then once you do one, then you have a proof of concept. Then you can say, well, here's like how it worked. Here's the documents. Here's the payout. And then as I progressed on, I was changing the model because like when I
Okay.
first started, I was like, oh my God, somebody wants to be my partner. I was wanting to, have a partner, go bigger, go faster, right? And I was just like, oh my God, somebody wants to partner with me. So we're like equal partners, but then I do like basically all the work. I don't do
Okay.
the accounting part of it, and legal entity setup, but like finding the deals, the property management, getting the lending set up, analyzing, like I do all that. And so like as I progressed to new partnerships, I was changing the value prop specifically for me. So then I moved into where I was doing, um, the other person would front the money, and then I would pay them back my half over 2 years, which basically my roughly my share of the revenue from the property was de facto paying my share back.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
Okay.
now I only get in if like somebody will do 50% equity, and I have $0 in because like I'm to a point now where it's like the incremental ad is needs to be a big enough nugget for me to want to move forward. Otherwise, I'll just do it myself.
No, that makes perfect sense, and that's a great structure. Um, I think it's just very important, like you said earlier, and when you started talking, that you just have to tell everyone that you're in real estate, and by
Mhm,
doing that, you're going to get partnerships. I heard you say Detroit.
mhm.
What made you go to Detroit?
So obviously, on if you're follow Bigger Pockets,
Yeah.
they used to they used to talk crap all the time to Detroit, and then I was like, I was getting to a point where I was getting into the teens somewhere in
Okay.
Milwaukee, and I was like, well, maybe I should look at diversifying at another market. And they had the Detroit Auto Show, and a friend of mine at work was like into cars. I'm like, well, that'd be kind of cool. Go to Detroit, check the auto show out, and then let's look at some properties. And then I got out there and I was like, well, it's very similar in terms of it's a cash flow market. Um, in terms of the condition and the environment is definitely further, I don't know what the right word, downtrodden maybe.
Yes.
There's obviously high end areas in Detroit, but in terms of the cash flow market, there's a swath of it. And so the key learning is you got to find the right person to partner with, i.e., agent and property manager.
Sure.
And so I interviewed a couple of people there. I found a guy that is like my one stop shop. So he does my
Perfect.
property management and he's my agent. So when I look at an offer, I ask him would he manage it, and if he says yes, then I put the offer in. If he says no, then I
Gotcha.
don't put the offer in.
So right now in your business, right? So like you said, it has to be somewhat incremental for you to be able to for you to pull the trigger on a deal right now because you want to scale. So when how do you decide where you're going to go as far as getting a deal in what market? Since you're in several markets, is it just as the deals come up, you're going to just assess them and maybe the higher end, whether it's like a nice home that you can short term rental or higher unit count. Are you selectively picking your markets now as far as what you're going to get moving forward?
Yeah, on a go forward basis, yes.
Okay.
Prior to about a year ago, like I had just the flywheel was whipping around fast. Like I could buy properties like very easy between 2 and 4 units. I had a bank set up to where like go in 5 signatures, buying a property. It
Done.
was averaging a property like every other month. And I just kind of was banging them out, banging them out. They're all MLS stuff, um, C class type stuff. And then at a certain point I was like, man, all my friends in Seattle properties are going way up. Their equity is blowing up. I'm like, okay, now I should now I want to look in my backyard. At the same
Okay.
time, I paid for a wholesaling course, and that got me into specifically in my area in Seattle. And then I did one. I ended up getting one deal. I did a JV flip on that, and then I kind of paused. And then about a year ago, then I got into another course where is really focused around wholesaling. And then now I'm like transitioning all my time and energy into my backyard because I can do less transactions, higher margins, higher equity. And if you get the right deal, you can do a burr and you can recycle your money versus all the properties in Milwaukee except for one. They generally, I wasn't value adding. I was just buying it. I already had tenants in there, just cash flow from day one. So if I can buy locally, off market, add value, the value of my time translating into a burr is like it's the simplest, easy way for me to continue to do transactions and expand the portfolio.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So are you a and it might have switched, as you started, but are you a cash flow or appreciation?
Yeah, so originally it was always cash flow.
Yeah.
Now I'm like a hybrid. So when you asked me that
Okay.
question, I was going to say yes, meaning
Yes.
both. And so, but now I'm more focused on Seattle area because I've got the cash flow coming in from the Midwest. And when I usually give like presentations to groups and I talk about this movie called There Will Be Blood, and where the guy, it's a famous section where he has the I'll drink your milkshake, right? So I use that terminology because I put all these oil rigs in Milwaukee, and what do? They generate oil, cash flow,
Yeah.
and I'm sucking that into Seattle, and now I take that money and I buy assets in Seattle. Now I use the
Yeah.
cash flow to generate the appreciation, and now I'm focused on off market in Seattle to help get me more equity plays here.
I think it's a very healthy balance when you have both cash flow and appreciation investments. And when I
Mhm.
first got into 100% cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, but now I'm kind of looking at things that I can hold for maybe a couple years and then 1031 it into something bigger.
Right.
So I think that's huge. So I want to touch on this as well. I mean, I think this is very cool. We have not had a guest talk about it yet, but you have tiny homes. And
Exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
can you just tell us about what's your strategy as far as investing in tiny homes?
Yeah. I actually have four of them now. I
Okay.
bought three off Craigslist, and then I had my fourth one built. And
Wow.
this tiny home started out just kind of at a whim, and it was a lot of pain, but now has come to fruition and is paying off. So the way I found this deal was, it was probably around, I can't remember, I think it's 2018, and I was up late at night at my mom's house at on Christmas, and I couldn't go to sleep, so I was like, I always comb through Craigslist, and on this one night, I got two deals. I got a fourplex seller finance deal in Milwaukee, and I
Wow.
got these three tiny homes from that same night of research. Um, and so first when I saw these, I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. So I, it triggered my mind. I'm like, okay, these might make some money here. So I started followed up with the seller that on that night. While he's giving me info, I'm looking around on Airbnb. I'm like, are there any tiny homes? First, there was what I noticed is very niche. There just wasn't very many of them, and the ones that were there booked like solid. And I was like, holy crap! So then I started reaching out to the people on Airbnb. I'm like, hey, what's kind of normal occupancy? What's kind of normal rents? And I'm like, I talked to this one guy. I thought he said he made like almost 10,000, some ridiculous number, like almost 10,000 gross. I'm like, oh my god. And back to the original house hack, which I didn't know at the time, it's actually a land bank because I'm on 2/3 of an acre, and I was like, well, I'll just put these tiny homes on my property in
Oh
Seattle.
wow.
And so that was my original game plan. I was like, I'll buy these tiny homes, put them on my property in Seattle, and then easy money, right? And then I bought them, and then reality set in. I'm like, oh my god, what did I do? And so then that's where the learning came in. I was like, level one, I was like, I couldn't move them right away because then I was like, well, you got to have utilities, right? So then I was
Yeah.
like, so then I was trying to figure out how do I get power, water, sewer, and then I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be like $100,000. And
Oh wow.
then the way to get the utility set up would be the road where the my Airbnb tenants come in. So I converted from long term to Airbnb, and then I was like, well, if one is 100,000, and two for like a couple months, I'd have to turn my Airbnb off. So then I'm losing money. So then I ended up befriending the Washington State Tiny Homes Association president, and he helped me move them from where I bought them to a mobile home park where he was managing them. And then there it wasn't a great spot, barely making, literally barely even grossing any money.
Yeah.
Only one of three was set up, and then two of three were set up. A third one never was set up. And
Yeah.
then over time, that same contact ended up buying his own land and creating his own community. And then I moved all three of them over to there, and that was at the beginning of 21. And it's been just a roller coaster, up and to the right.
Oh
And it's
wow.
been, the first 2 years, literally, I was like, what did I do? The last year and a half, I'm like, damn, these things are crushing it.
Oh, that's all. Well, two things real quick to touch on. First thing, I think Craigslist is a great place to buy properties. That's my first property. That's where I got a seller financing deal
Yep.
as well. And it's just the best place to look. Everyone overlooks it and just goes to other places. But I think that's huge. The second thing is you mentioned that um, you contacted the Airbnb hosts that already had tiny homes. I think that's a great tip because it you don't have to do it just on tiny homes, but even at
Right.
Airbnb in your local area, if you just reach out and say, "Hey, what are you getting? What's your average occupancy rate?" I think that's huge because then they can kind of give you their feedback, and you're not guessing at that point. You have like strict analytics that you can kind of dive into. So
Yep.
I think those are two great points that you mentioned. So what was the cost to move these tiny homes? Because you moved them twice.
Yeah. So the first time, I think it was 500 ish
Oh, okay, okay,
per, I you know somewhere in there.
yeah,
So
okay. And is that just like a mobile home? Like you put wheels on it?
well, actually, it's not like a mobile home. And these one, actually, I guess it is because it's literally a little tiny house on a trailer that
Oh,
it's
okay,
on a
gotcha.
hitch, right? So you just need a big enough pickup to
Yeah.
put it on the hitch and then take it out. And
Okay.
so it was, and they weren't going very far, and it was backcountry road, so it
Yeah.
wasn't too bad.
Got you. So when you moved them to the first place, you had to put them on like a pad that already had the electric, the water, the sewer. So you had to pay a fee for the land as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that was, I think the lot rent was like 600 or something, and I was
Oh.
barely even covering that at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Okay. And now you have them in uh another park, if you will say,
Right.
and you still have that same fee.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's 600 or 650, something like that.
Got you. Okay. So the only I'm just asking because is there still a possibility for you to put it on that duplex, that piece of land?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah, but at that point it probably just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, and this is where, I mentioned earlier about land banking. And what I'm running into is like I have 2/3 of an acre, and come to find out the city's upzoning me. So like the end game there is probably tear down my duplex and then go up with, let's see, I think I'll be able to put 12 units.
Wow, really?
Hmm.
You're able to put after tearing down a duplex, you're able to put 12 units.
Oh yeah.
Is there any type like did you know that when you were purchasing, or is that something you found out after you purchased it?
Well, see, now I called, that's like the and one, right? Like the and
Yeah, yeah,
one was the rental unit, and the other
yeah.
and one, I was like, man, there's a lot of land here, and I'm in Seattle. I'm like one of the last. I'm on the edge of Seattle, and
Okay,
I was like, well, you can always build. And the guy next to me has almost the same lot. He has 12 units already on there. I was like, well, Jesus. at some point in the future, I'll just do that.
Wow. No, that's a great idea. It's crazy to see the like the land restrictions and whatnot because where I'm at in Maryland, if you have a duplex, no matter what size of land you're on, if you tear it down and you take down every piece of that duplex, most likely they're gonna only say you can put a single family home on. So
Oh wow.
that's definitely interesting. But so you're short term renting it right now, right? How have they have been doing better now, but what's your occupancy rate typically? And what's your the benefits of having people rent there? Is there a park nearby? What kind of people do you have in there?
For the tiny homes?
Yes.
So the tiny homes, it's like almost exactly 1 hour equidistance to Seattle and to the mountains.
Okay.
So like right now we're about ready, with spring break kind of kicks off the peak season all the way to call it end of September because
Yeah.
that's when most families are traveling. You've got the people that want to come to Seattle for Seattle, and then some want to do the hiking and rivers, and some want to do both. And so it's like super peak season right now. That's our typical traveler that's staying there. We get quite a few, and actually we got some right now, traveling nurses that want like
Yeah.
their own spot. And these some people don't like being close to other people, so these are in like on a 20-acre lot, and there's they're close but enough space. So we got
Yeah.
those people. Then we got people who sold their house because Seattle's so hot. Like people put their house up and then they can't buy another house. So then they're like, well,
Exactly.
I just need a spot for a couple months. I don't know how long. So we get those people. And then the last one, we get people that are like, I want to buy a tiny house, but I want to live in one and before I buy it. And so then we'll get people that'll stay for a couple weeks and they're like, okay, now I'm
Oh,
ready.
that's great. That's great. No, that's an awesome investment, and I haven't had anyone that has done tiny homes before, so that's extremely interesting. Out of all the investments that you're doing right now, which ones are your favorite to do? Because I know you do flipping, you do wholesaling, you do all types. What are your favorite to do?
Favorite to do? Mm. It's I do like the so if you break it down short term, medium term, and long term, I like the consistency of the long term because
Yeah.
I'm a control guy. So like the variation on that is much lower. Medium term rental, a little bit more. Short term rental, I mean, there was one month where like I had to pay my property manager who owns the land because I have to pay him 2,400 a month. So
Wow.
$600 per month for lot rent, right? So if I don't generate 2,400 or more, which if you're off season, that's not necessarily easy to do, even with four tiny homes. So then that's like the worst case. But in best case, like last year I had three. Best case was almost 10,000 gross.
Wow.
So now that I have four, like theoretically, maybe it's 12 to 14,000 would be the peak, right? So
Yeah.
you have the high of highs, but then the low of lows, and then obviously with COVID, in COVID, like my tiny homes weren't making no money, and my one Airbnb that was below me, all my bookings dried up. So I went from having income coming in to like zero from short term rentals. So I like them to supplement, but I don't necessarily like them to be the whole thing. I know there's people that kill it like with
Yeah.
five and they can retire. But if something happens, competitions, laws change, COVID, whatever, you are done overnight. And so like in terms of me, like if you're thinking about a stock portfolio, it's a weighted um, allocation, if you will. So I got short term,
Yeah.
medium term, long term. I got Washington, Milwaukee, and Detroit. I've got flips. I got multiple other avenues of to bring money to kind of stabilize things, so that as I'm, what I like to say, graduate, retiring from W-2 life, I want the stability so that I don't have to go back. I never Once I'm gone, I want to be gone and stay gone. So I don't ever want to go
Exactly.
back.
Yeah, you don't want to go back in a year, but yeah, no, I mean diversification. That's why you diversify and you have those different types of assets that some will
Right.
cash flow a little bit more, but during COVID, how were you affected during COVID, if at all? I know you said with the short term rentals, did you have any problems whatsoever with the longer term tenants as well?
Yeah, it was actually really scary because like obviously the short-term rental is gone overnight. The bookings I had for 3 months are gone. All right, so there's like 2 to 3 thousand a month gone. Then it's like, okay, are all my tenants just not going to pay me anymore? At that point in
Oh,
time,
jeez.
I'd crossed over, and every investor will get this way who's working at W-2. When you start buying properties, you make more in your W-2 than your mortgages. And then at some point in time, your mortgages for your properties are greater than your monthly take home. So like if something happens, that doesn't take very long for that equation to go against you. Well, I was there. I was like, oh my God, what if these people don't pay? I was like, it's over 10,000 a month, 10 to 12,000 a month,
Yeah.
theoretically, mortgages, right? So then I was like, all right, now I need to figure out what the options were. So then I applied for EIDL loans just in case, and then I didn't even use that money because for a while there um, it was actually fine. It wasn't until like the end of the first year when it started to really start, when all the initial money that floated to all the tenants and everything kind of went through. And then 2021 is where I saw like my what is it called? Accounts receivable balance is just going up. There's at
Going
one
up.
point in time where I had $50,000 owed to me, and it was a
Wow.
lot of it was like four tenants that owed like almost 10,000 a piece.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's like, you know, very easily like I was just talking about stability.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't very stable right there. So I was like, man, this is like backs against the wall. So then I'm like, okay, now I had the EIDL money. I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna use it because like these guys aren't paying,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure that I can survive this. And so I ended up lucking out. A couple of those those guys that owed me a lot of money ended up getting their second or third round of funding from whatever local community support. And so then it started coming down to where I'm probably 10 to 15,000 still owed to
Oh,
me.
well. Wow.
But much it makes me feel better than the 50,000.
Yeah, more comfortable, exactly. And
Right.
what are you doing to prepare yourself in case something like this were to happen again?
So right now a lot of it is like stockpiling. So
Yeah,
like I store cash in high cash value life insurance policies. I've got gold and silver. It's like a hedge against inflation. Two,
yeah,
it's not necessarily hey, it's not necessarily tangible and easy to convert to cash, so it makes me hold on to it.
yeah. Got you. So you're saying by your other investments basically are what makes you feel more comfortable going to bed at night, knowing that if this were to happen again, that you'd be fine.
Right.
Would you say that your property manager with tenant selection is probably going to be another huge thing that could save you from something like that, or having a tenant that would not pay?
Hold on 1 second.
No, you're good.
All right, my dog's here at work and
Dude, that's all.
he's barking.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You can bring your dog to work.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in the Amazon offices, and I mean, there's only like 1% of people showing up. So like,
Yeah,
I
got you.
almost have this whole floor to myself.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's insane. But yeah, did you hear my question? You want me to say it again?
So in terms of property management, picking the tenants, yes.
Yeah,
So a lot of these properties, when I buy them off MLS, the tenants are already in there. So you're set with whatever you get. Then as the tenants roll over, then they're using their own guidance or their own credit requirements. And so, generally speaking, it's getting better across the board. So that's helped to improve on some of the tenants that aren't paying, the leases end, we're able to move them out. Then we try to backfill with better tenants. And then as I'm continuing to buy, I'm trying to buy in better areas closer
yeah,
to the path of progress versus before I was buying like, hey, if it was cash flowing, I need to get out. The fast way to get out is cash flow. Not always the greatest location, but as I grew in terms of knowledge and of the local market, I know that there's this one street in Milwaukee the closer you get to that street, that's the convergence zone. So
Gotcha.
um, it's only a matter of time before, because you um, that street is the north south, and to the what is that, to the east of it, there's only a little bit until you go to water. So that
Yeah.
population has to go over the street, and that's where,
Gotcha.
like, if you ever see where hipsters are at, that's generally like,
Yeah.
you know the up and coming area. And so I started buying in there, and then, like, in my opinion, in the next 5 to 10 years, like, that whole area will raise up, because the population base is the higher income earners are going to move across that
Move
street.
forward. Gotcha. Okay, no, that makes perfect sense. So I mean, with 33 properties right now, I mean, you're obviously doing something right. You're crushing it. And what's the goal moving forward to you? You said you had 88 units, right?
Yep.
So what's the goal moving forward? Do you just want to stockpile, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, this is literally an addiction. I love it, right? So I have deal heat, because I just love doing deals. It does not feel like work. It feels fun to me. I actually have one in contract, which will add two properties, 12 units. And
Okay.
then right before this call, like, got a verbal agreement on another four property package for another 5 units. So that'll take me
Wow.
to like 105 units. And then my I'm going to continue to focus. Now I'm focusing back on my Seattle area and start getting some more cash flow, i.e. flips or wholesales. But ideally, I can get that diamond in the rough, do the burrs as I move forward.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I guess your overall goal is to accumulate as many properties as you can because you genuinely enjoy doing this,
Right.
and obviously the cash doesn't suck. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, you've been great to talk to so far. We're gonna start asking you the outro questions here,
Right.
and one of this ones I'm gonna lay it on you. It may be not tricky but hard to think of one, but what's the best advice that you've been given in terms of real estate investing?
Best advice. It's kind of hard to say because it's been so
Yeah,
much. Because I listen to so
I'm
many
sure.
podcasts. Um, I,
And anything that comes to mind, could be simple, could be
there's one that not necessarily was given to me, but one that I formulate that I've through accumulation of people that I
perfect.
give to other people, and that it's like people get very eager to get in the game. And I always say, no one deal is going to make you rich, but one deal can make you go poor. So, like, I like the bias for action, but you've got to do your due diligence, get into the right deal such that you're not one and done. If you got one, you break even, one a small profit, that you can build off of. But one where you end up taking in the shorts for, a lot of money or get sued or whatever, like, that can shut you down, both financially. For a lot of people, what I see is mentally. They get that wrong one at the beginning. They're scared to get back into the game.
Yeah, and honestly, you could take that a little further, and even if it's like your fifth, sixth, seventh deal, if you buy a really bad deal, it could stop you from progressing as
Right.
fast as you were and take you 4 steps back. So no, that's great advice. That is great advice.
Mhm.
So yeah, next one. So what is your why?
So my why is my goal. I call this like the bullseye scenario, where it's like center of a bullseye is me. Like, my goal is to become financially free to do whatever I want. But then the next level would be immediate family, and then the level outside of that, like, is where I want to get to. Is where then you're helping out the friends and family and extended people, and that's through I'm going to turn 43 this year. I want to be able to, like, pause, help myself get out of the rat race, and then help others. But I always go back. There's this one time where I was stuck in traffic, and it was like 8:30 or something. I was supposed to be at the office at 8, and I went by this golf course. It's a sunny day. I see this guy playing golf, and then I see this other guy just running down the street. They, like, could care less about the workday. I'm like, that's what I want to be, right? So like that's my level one, that's the center of the bullseye. And then how do I expand out and get the friends and family and extended acquaintances and people I know to get to that same level.
I love that, man. Love it. And last one before we start asking you about your Instagram and everything. But what would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now? What would you tell yourself when you were just beginning?
Mm. Yeah, interesting. If I was just beginning, like I know at the very beginning I was still a little nervous and hesitant. I wish I would have, it sounds funny because it seems like there's a lot, but I would have like gone bigger, faster, like and dabbled more into partnerships because like what I've learned is like if I would have got around b- consistent heavy hitters at the beginning, I'm just getting that now because I'm paying to get into mentorships and access to bigger and people that are way ahead of me. If I would have done that like at the beginning, who knows? That could be like 100 properties. It could be 1,000 doors. It could be syndications. There's other people that I started connecting with at the very beginning, like Lane Kaoka, Elisa Zhang, and they absolutely exploded. They probably have between the two of them 1.5 billion of assets under management. They went the syndication route. I went the what I call the ground and pound, the small stuff.
Yeah.
Both of them have their own pros and cons, but if I would have hung out with more people consistently, I probably would have expanded more, would have scaled faster than what I am at today.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is just because for the people that are just starting today, I think it's huge that now that you've done everything, you're pretty much saying you would have gone bigger, faster, and you probably would have tried to get into real estate sooner. So
Oh yeah,
I think the first step is just dive in and obviously do your due diligence, do number crunch.
right.
If you have a mentor, if you don't, just see if you can find any type of advice like Bigger Pockets forums. You can find all types of resources. So I think the biggest thing is just diving in and. I think that's huge. What you said as far as that, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, 20% of one deal is better than zero of nothing. So,
Right.
definitely agree with that.
Make and making those connections too. Like I used to be so nervous like going to these meetups. I would literally like sit there and I'd sweat because I was nervous. And I remember like Tarl Yarbers does all these big meetups in the Northwest, and then he's friends with Brandon Turner, and Brandon Turner came in there. I was like, oh my God, that's Brandon Turner, and I was like so nervous. I couldn't even talk to him. I was too nervous, and I'm like,
yeah,
man, what if I like got over that and did that at the beginning, and not just the Brandon Turners and the Tarls, but there's a lot of like heavy hitters when you go into these meetings or meetups and like connecting with them and learning from them as they go. I would have been way farther ahead if I would have done that.
yep. You wanna, being the small fish in a big pond or with the big pond is huge
Mm.
because you grow faster.
Right.
And I totally agree with that. That surround yourself with people that where you want to be is only going to excel you further faster. So I
Exactly.
couldn't agree more with that. So where can people find you if they're interested in finding more about you? Seeing you have great content on your Instagram
Yep.
as far as people just learning. You have a lot of information out there, and then also just seeing your projects and what you've been up to is pretty cool. So where can people find you?
Yeah, most of what my content's on Facebook and Instagram. I think both of them are JC Cambra. And then I have a profile on Bigger Pockets as well under my name, Justin Cambra. But what I like to do is like I'm more like a real world guy. So like I'll send you pictures of the good and the bad and the ugly. So like working through evictions, working through people breaking in, calling the cops, running through the financials on the full cycle burr, all that kind of stuff is like I like to get that out there because that's what I didn't get. So tons and tons of content is out there that's free. It's a lot of time generalized. But like for me, I'm like, you give me like a exact like this is the buy, this is the rehab, or this is the rents, this is the purchase price, these are more. That is like easy for me to be like,
well, if I know what this looks like, I just need to find more things like this, right? And so I like try to give real world examples so that other people can follow along, and hopefully that helps them either get their first property or their next property faster.
Yeah, we connected on Instagram, and I see how you put out those quarterly or monthly tiny home,
Hmm.
just showing all the information, all the numbers, and everything, which is a huge help. And nothing, grinds, and they're transparent and authentic, and nothing grinds my gears more than seeing someone on Instagram just posting only the success. And it's like
Yeah,
you got to learn. The reason you grow is from the failures. So I
right.
think it's huge to show those, which you do. Which so I'll put that in the show notes. Everyone can go over there and follow you. You have great content, and if anyone that wants to reach out to you could offer any value to you, what would that be?
So right now, I'm looking for private capital. So as I'm getting new deals, and literally as we were just right here, that one verbal agreement he just docu-signed. So now I'm under contract, and now I'll have what I'm trying to do in a perfect world is like I get a deal under contract, and then I find a capital partner, they fund the deal, and then ideally after a couple years we do cash out refi, pay them off, I own it, zero out of pocket. And so and this deal, it's like it took me a year to get it, and it's finally just
Yeah.
happened. It's my
Oh wow.
elusive seller finance subject to 0% interest deal. So
Congratulations,
now
man.
I'm just trying to find the down to make it even better, to where I have $0 out of pocket. The property pays the private lender, and it's just all gravy for me. So private
Perfect, man.
money lending is like my number one thing, and number two would be deals in and around Seattle area.
Perfect, perfect. Well, you're making me slack. You making me feel like I'm slacking. That you getting all these deals under contract and whatnot. I need to get after it. But no, man. Thank you so much for being on. I will put your Instagram, your Facebook, your Bigger Pockets, profile. I'll put that all in the show notes so people can reach out to you and find you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. I think you added a ton of value, and I think you're a great you're a great person for people to follow on Instagram, because like you just said, you are transparent and authentic with your posts, which is huge, and people can learn a lot from you. So thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, man.
Evan, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Take care.